Ralph used to say secrets were safe between two people if one of them was dead. I should have known better when I trusted him. In the beginning, it felt like we were inseparable, two halves of a broken coin fitting together perfectly. I told him everything. My childhood dreams, the mistakes I'd buried, the fears I whispered into my pillow when nobody was around to hear. Ebony and Ralph. It sounded like forever, and I wanted so badly for it to be true. The first time I introduced him to Diana and David, he made them laugh so easily. Like he belonged with my people, like he could slip right into my world without needing permission. Diana raised an eyebrow when he pulled me close and kissed my forehead in front of everyone. She always noticed things before I did. I should have paid more attention to her eyes that night. The way they didn't smile even when her lips did. It started small. At least, small enough that I could excuse it. Ralph would retell little things I had said in confidence, turning them into jokes among our friends. I would laugh along, even when my chest tightened. It's just Ralph, I told myself. He's just being funny. But it wasn't funny when David mentioned things only Ralph could have told him. It wasn't funny when Diana started looking at me with something almost like pity. I confronted Ralph one night after a party, when the alcohol had stripped away his polished charm and left him raw and irritable. He leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, that crooked smile on his face that I used to find irresistible. "You're overreacting, Eb," he said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand like I was some buzzing fly he couldn't be bothered to swat properly. "Everyone talks. It's not a big deal." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You told them about my dad, Ralph, about what happened when I was 17. That wasn't for laughs." He shrugged like it meant nothing. "You're too sensitive. It's just a story. It's not like it changes who you are." But it did. It changed the way they looked at me, like I was broken in a way I hadn't wanted anyone to know. Like every good thing I'd built for myself was just cheap scaffolding, ready to collapse with the smallest push. The final blow came a week later. Diana called me, her voice low and hesitant. "Ebony, I think you should know. Ralph's been saying things about you, about your past." She hesitated before adding, he said, "You're the kind of girl who'll never be more than a good time. That you're cheap." I didn't cry. Not then. I thanked her for telling me and hung up before the sob caught in my throat. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, the weight of humiliation pressing down so hard I could barely breathe. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the shame, the brutal, cutting shame of knowing I had trusted someone who never saw me the way I thought he did. I wasn't his partner. I was a story he could spin, a secret he could sell to make himself feel powerful. At midnight, I started packing, not just the things that were his, but everything that had ever connected me to him. I scrubbed my phone, deleted every photo, every message, every trace of the girl who had believed in him. I even went so far as to change my number. I wasn't leaving a single crack open for him to slide back through. When the sun came up, I was sitting on my porch, with my suitcase at my feet, waiting for the cab that would take me to a new apartment across town. Somewhere he had never seen, somewhere his lies couldn't follow. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to. Ralph had made it perfectly clear what he thought of me. And now, he didn't get to know anything about me ever again. The cab driver didn't ask questions when he saw my red-rimmed eyes and the two worn suitcases I shoved into the trunk. He just nodded, played some old slow jazz on the radio, and let me sit in silence. I stared out the window as the streets blurred by, every corner pulling me farther from the life I had known with Ralph. It was strange how a city could feel so small when you were trying to run from memories, and so impossibly big when you needed a fresh start. The new apartment was nothing special. A cramped third-floor walk-up with creaky floors and a stubborn front door that needed a good shove to close properly. But it was mine. No one knew where I was, not even Diana. I had to be alone for a while. I needed to be just Ebony, not Ralph's girlfriend, not the broken girl he made jokes about. Just me, breathing, surviving, rebuilding. I unpacked slowly, like if I went too fast, I might miss something important. Every piece of clothing folded carefully into the drawers, every book lined up with shaky hands on the tiny shelf by the bed. I even bought a cheap little lamp from the corner store, its soft, golden glow making the cracked walls look almost warm. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and that counted for something. A few days passed in a daze. I stayed busy with little things, cleaning, cooking, rearranging the few things I had. But loneliness crept in like smoke under a door. Nights were the worst. That was when my mind wandered to all the things I didn't want to remember. Ralph's laugh, the way he used to trace patterns on my back when he thought I was sleeping, the promises whispered in the dark. Lies, every one of them. One night, when the silence got too loud, I called Diana. I almost hung up after the first ring, but she picked up too fast. Ebony? Her voice cracked, like she hadn't been sure she'd hear from me again. Yeah, it's me, I whispered. There was a long pause, filled only with breathing on both ends. Finally, she said, I'm so sorry. Eb, I should have told you sooner. I should have. You did enough. I cut in softly. You told me when it mattered. Diana hesitated. David's been hearing things. Ralph's acting like he's the victim, telling everyone you used him, that you were just after his money. I laughed bitterly, wiping my face, even though no tears had fallen. Ralph didn't even have money. He lived paycheck to paycheck, always scheming for the next big break that never came. I had paid for more dinners than I could count, smiled through his failures, believed in dreams he barely worked for, and still, he was painting me as the villain. Let him talk, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. He needs a story where he's the hero. I don't. You're stronger than him, Diana said fiercely. You always were. Maybe I was. I hung up, feeling a little lighter, even if only by a hair. Diana didn't ask to visit, and I didn't offer. Some things you had to face alone. The next morning, there was a knock at my door. My stomach twisted as I froze halfway through making coffee. Only a handful of people knew I lived here, and none of them would just show up unannounced. I edged to the door and peered through the peephole. It was David, his dark jacket soaked from the rain, hair dripping into his eyes. He looked nervous, shifting from foot to foot like he wasn't sure he should even be there. Against my better judgment, I opened the door a crack. David? He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. Hey, Ebony, look, I know you probably don't want visitors, but I had to come. Why? He ran a hand through his wet hair, glancing up the hallway like someone might be watching. It's about Ralph, and you need to hear it from me before it gets worse. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs. I wanted to slam the door, bury myself back in my little safe cave, pretend none of this was happening. But I didn't. I opened the door wider and let him in. David stepped inside, dripping water all over the scuffed wooden floor. He looked uncomfortable, shifting from side to side, wiping his palms on his jeans like he didn't know where to start. I handed him a towel without saying a word and sat down on the edge of the couch, bracing myself. He hesitated before sitting across from me, towel clutched tightly in his hands. Ralph's been telling people things, he began, eyes dropping to the floor. Bad things, Ebony, stuff that isn't just embarrassing. It's cruel, dangerous. I folded my arms across my chest, feeling that familiar weight pressing down on me again. Like what? He swallowed hard. He's saying you stole from him, that you took money out of his account when you left, that you blackmailed him. People are starting to talk, Eb. Not just our friends. It's getting around his job too. For a second, the room spun. I closed my eyes, willing the nausea to pass. He's lying, I said hoarsely. You know that. I know. David leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But not everyone does. And Ralph's good at this, twisting things, making himself look like the poor guy who got played. I stared at the wall behind him, breathing shallowly. Of course Ralph wouldn't just let me go quietly. Of course he had to drag me down with him, to make sure if he lost face, I'd lose everything. David's voice softened. I can talk to people, tell them the truth. So can Diana. You're not alone in this. A sharp laugh escaped me before I could stop it. It doesn't matter, David. People will believe whatever makes them feel better about themselves. They'll pick the version where I'm the villain because it's easier than facing the fact that Ralph's just garbage. He didn't argue. Maybe because he knew I was right. You should be careful, he said after a moment. Ralph's spiraling, drinking a lot, saying reckless stuff. If he thinks you're a threat to his reputation, I don't know what he might do. I hugged my knees to my chest, suddenly cold. What do you suggest? That I run away again? David shook his head. No, I'm saying you should stand your ground. Ralph's counting on you to hide, to be too scared to fight back. I wanted to believe I could be that strong. But sitting there, with rain hammering against the windows and my life feeling like it was slipping through my fingers again, it was hard. David must have seen it on my face because he reached out, his hand hovering uncertainly before touching my wrist lightly. You don't have to fight alone, okay? The touch was simple, innocent, but it sparked something inside me that had been numb for too long. I straightened up, pulling my sleeves over my hands. I'm not scared of him, I said quietly, and I realized it was true. I wasn't scared of Ralph. I was scared of losing myself again, of being dragged into his mess, his lies, his chaos. David gave me a small, encouraging smile. Good, because there's more. My stomach dropped. More? He nodded grimly. Ralph's planning something. He's got some of your old messages, photos. He's threatening to leak them. Make you look like you were obsessed with him. Like you're unstable. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I thought I had erased everything, wiped every trace. But of course, Ralph would have copies. He kept receipts for the battles he planned to win later. I stood up suddenly, needing to move, needing air. He wants to destroy me, I said, half to myself. David stayed seated, giving me space, but watching me closely. He wants to feel like he won, even if he has to burn everything down to do it. I pressed my hands against my forehead, trying to think through the panic. What can I do? David's voice was steady, almost to calm. We get ahead of him. We tell the truth before he gets the chance to twist it. I turned to him slowly. You're saying I should tell everyone everything? I'm saying, David said, standing now too, that you take your story back, before he weaponizes it against you. I stared at him, my heart pounding so loudly it was the only thing I could hear. For the first time in weeks, I felt something sharp and alive rise up in me. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was survival. Maybe it was both. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I didn't even have to set an alarm. My body was just wired, buzzing with nerves and something sharper, a hunger to take control again. I made coffee and sat at the tiny kitchen table, staring at my phone like it was a loaded gun. David had sent me a list of names. People Ralph had already poisoned with his lies. Friends we used to laugh with. People who used to know the real me, before Ralph made sure all they could see was the story he wanted to sell. I knew what I had to do, but knowing and doing weren't the same thing. My thumb hovered over Diana's number for a full minute. Before I forced myself to tap it, she answered almost immediately, her voice breathless. Ebony? Yeah, it's me, I said, feeling the words catch in my throat for a second. I need your help, anything, she said without hesitation. Just tell me what to do. Hearing that, it cracked something open inside me. Maybe I wasn't as alone as Ralph wanted me to feel. I need people to hear the truth, I said slowly. Not just from me, from someone they still trust. I'm already in, Diana said. David too. We'll set the record straight. You don't have to do this alone. By noon, it had started. A few carefully placed messages, private conversations. Not screaming, not drama, just calm, steady truth. The real version of what had happened between Ralph and me. How he had chipped away at my trust, used my secrets against me, and then tried to turn the story upside down when I walked away. Some people didn't want to hear it. I could tell from the cold silences, the read messages without replies. But others listened. And that was enough. It didn't take long for Ralph to realize what was happening. He showed up at my apartment 2 days later, banging on the door so hard it rattled the frame. Ebony, open the damn door, he shouted, his voice slurred and wild. I stood frozen in the living room, my heart thudding so hard it hurt. David had warned me this could happen. I picked up my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911, my voice steady, even though I felt like I might crumble any second. There's a man outside my door, I said. He's yelling, threatening. I need help. The operator stayed on the line with me, calm and professional, while I waited. I kept my eyes on the door, watching the shadow of Ralph pacing, pounding, swearing. You're nothing without me, he screamed. You think they'll believe you? You're just a cheap little. The sound of sirens cut through his words like a blade. He went quiet for a second, then I heard him bolt down the hallway, his footsteps pounding like frantic drum beats. When the police arrived, I told them everything, showed them the threatening messages he had sent, told them about the harassment, the lies. For the first time, I said it all out loud, without shame strangling me halfway through, and they listened. They issued a restraining order that afternoon. When the officer handed me the paperwork, he looked me in the eye and said, "You did the right thing. Don't ever let someone like him make you feel small." I nodded, biting the inside of my cheek to keep from crying. Not tears of sadness this time, but relief. That night, Diana and David came over. They brought cheap wine and bad takeout, and sat cross-legged on my floor like we were kids again. Before all the betrayals and the heartbreak, "You're a damn warrior," Diana said, raising her plastic cup in a toast. David smiled at me across the room, something warm and steady in his eyes. "Told you were stronger than him." I clinked my cup against theirs and drank, the cheap wine burning my throat. But I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I believed them. I wasn't broken. I wasn't cheap. I was free. And Ralph? He was just a ghost now, rattling chains in a life I had already left behind. A week passed without a single knock at my door, without a single blocked call or cruel whisper. It was strange how silence could feel like a gift after living so long waiting for the next blow to land. I started sleeping better, a little at a time. No more waking up with my heart racing. No more checking over my shoulder every time I walked down the street. David kept checking in. Sometimes a text, sometimes he'd swing by with coffee or a sandwich, like it was no big deal, like we were just friends. I didn't know what to call it yet. I just knew I started looking forward to seeing him more than I wanted to admit. Diana was the same way. She'd drag me out to lunch or for a walk around the park, pushing me to talk about anything but Ralph. New movies, stupid gossip, a bakery she found that made the best red velvet cupcakes. Little things, ordinary things, things I had forgotten how much I missed. One evening, David and I sat on the rooftop of my building, watching the city lights flicker like tiny stars below. He passed me a bottle of cheap soda, and we clinked them together with a soft, hollow thud. "You ever think about starting over?" he asked, staring out at the skyline. I leaned back against the rough concrete, letting the cool night air wrap around me. "Every damn day," he smiled, not looking at me. "You're doing it, you know, even if it doesn't feel like it yet." I twisted the bottle in my hands, picking at the label. "Some days it feels like I'm just surviving, not living." "That's okay," he said quietly. "Surviving is part of it. Living comes later." I turned my head to look at him. His profile was soft, in the dim light, but there was a strength in it too. A steadiness I hadn't realized I craved until it was right in front of me. "You think I'll ever feel normal again?" I asked before I could stop myself. David finally looked at me, his eyes serious. "No," he said, "but you'll feel stronger. And after what you've been through, that's even better." I didn't answer. I just leaned my head against his shoulder, and he didn't pull away. We sat there in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Downstairs, my phone buzzed on. The kitchen counter. Messages were still coming in, but now they were different. Apologies from old friends who had believed Ralph's lies. Invitations from people I hadn't spoken to in months. Even a few strangers who had heard about what happened and just wanted to say they admired the way I fought back. I hadn't answered any of them yet. I wasn't ready. And maybe that was okay too, because healing wasn't a race. It wasn't a checklist I could rush through. It was slow, messy, complicated. Kind of like me. One night, Diana dragged me out to a small party. Nothing big. Just a few friends at someone's apartment. I almost said no. Crowds still made my skin crawl a little. But she gave me that look, the one that said she wasn't going to take no for an answer, so I caved. The moment we walked in, I could feel the stares, some curious, some guilty, a few even brave enough to smile. I kept my head high and found a corner to settle into, watching the room like a wary cat. David showed up later, his easy grin slicing through the tension like a knife. He handed me a drink and stood beside me, not crowding, just being there. "You're doing good," he said, nudging me lightly. I rolled my eyes. "I'm hiding in a corner." "You're here," he corrected. "That's more than most people would do." I smiled, a real one this time. And for a second, the noise and the looks faded away. Maybe I wasn't the girl who used to believe in fairy tales anymore. Maybe that version of me was gone. But what was rising up in her place? She was something better. Someone who knew exactly what she was worth. Someone who wasn't afraid to walk away when someone treated her like less. Someone who, against all odds, still believed in something better ahead. And maybe, just maybe, something better was already standing right beside her. A few days after the party, the air between David and me shifted in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. It wasn't in anything he said. He was still the same steady, quiet support he'd been from the start. It was the way he looked at me. When he thought I wasn't paying attention. Like I was something fragile and fierce all at once. Like he was waiting for me to realize it myself. I wasn't sure I was ready for anything new. My heart was still tender, still healing from the wreckage Ralph had left behind. But with David, it didn't feel rushed. It didn't feel like falling. It felt like standing still for the first time in a long time. One night, after another lazy dinner of takeout and movies, we ended up sitting close on the couch. Too close. My knee brushed his, and neither of us moved. The movie was still playing, some background noise about a heist gone wrong, but neither of us was really paying attention anymore. David turned toward me, his hand resting lightly on the couch between us, so close to mine that it made my skin buzz. "Ebony," he said softly, like saying my name was something sacred. I looked up at him, heart hammering against my ribs, so loud I was sure he could hear it. "Yeah." He didn't rush. He just studied my face like he was making sure, really sure, that I was okay. "I'm not Ralph," he said finally. "I'm not gonna hurt you. You don't have to be scared of me." The words hit something deep inside me, something raw and bruised that I didn't realize was still there. My throat tightened painfully, but I nodded, because that was all I could manage. "I know," I whispered, slowly, like he was giving me every chance to back away. He reached for my hand. Our fingers touched, and when I didn't pull away, he laced his with mine. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't a movie scene with swelling music. It was something smaller, quieter, infinitely more real. Safety, warmth, a choice, not a surrender. I rested my head against his shoulder, and he let out a breath like he'd been holding it in forever. For a while, we just sat there, wrapped up in the kind of silence that felt like a promise. Later that night, after he left, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection. My hair was messy, my sweatshirt oversized, my eyes still a little puffy from everything I'd been through. But for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't hate the girl looking back at me. She was scarred, sure, but she was still standing, still fighting, still capable of feeling something good. I crawled into bed and stared up at the ceiling, letting the quiet settle over me like a blanket. It would take time. I wasn't naive enough to think that one good moment could erase everything Ralph had done. There would be days when I still doubted myself, still heard his cruel words whispering at the edges of my mind. But now, I had proof that he hadn't broken me completely. I had proof that love, real love, didn't look like control or betrayal or humiliation. It looked like a boy who brought me coffee and gave me space. It looked like friends who stood by me when it would have been easier to walk away. It looked like starting over, one shaky step at a time, and no matter how long it took, I knew I'd get there, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking alone. The next few weeks passed in slow, careful steps. Life didn't magically fix itself overnight, but it felt different, now lighter somehow. I found myself laughing more, real laughter, not the polite smiles I used to force around Ralph. I spent weekends with Diana, who made it her mission to remind me who I was before I got tangled up in someone else's mess. David became a constant too, slipping into my days like he'd always been meant to be there. Sometimes he'd show up with a movie and no expectations. Sometimes we'd just walk, side by side, saying nothing, and it was enough. One Sunday afternoon, we ended up in a tiny park on the edge of the city, the kind of place most people didn't notice. It wasn't fancy, just cracked benches, uneven patches of grass, and a rusted old swing set, but it felt perfect. I kicked off my shoes and sat in the grass, feeling the sun on my face. David dropped down beside me, hands behind his head, eyes closed like he was soaking in every second. "You ever think about what you want?" he asked after a while. His voice was so low and lazy it almost melted into the breeze. I plucked a blade of grass and twisted it between my fingers. "Sometimes. Not like big dreams or anything, just small stuff." "Like what?" I thought about it for a second. "Like having a place that feels like home. Waking up next to someone and not wondering if they're lying to me. Laughing without checking if anyone's laughing at me behind my back." David opened one eye, smiling a little. "Small stuff, huh?" I shrugged, a little embarrassed. "Maybe it's stupid." "It's not," he said, his voice firm. "It's honest." We sat in the grass until the sun started to dip low, turning the sky soft shades of gold and pink. As we packed up to leave, I caught him watching me again, that same patient look he always had. This time, I didn't look away. "David," I said, my voice catching just a little. Yeah, if I'm still figuring things out, I said slowly. Are you okay waiting? He didn't even blink. I'm not going anywhere, Ebony. Something cracked wide open inside me then, but not in a way that hurt. It felt like breathing after holding my breath too long. Later, that night, lying in bed, I thought about Ralph, about the way he had rushed me, pressured me, made me feel like love had to hurt to be real. And then I thought about David, quiet, steady, patient, not trying to fix me, not trying to own me, just standing beside me, however long it took. It made me realize something I hadn't dared believe before. Ralph had taken pieces of me, but he hadn't destroyed me. He'd just made room for something better, something real. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Diana. It was just a simple photo, the two of us from a few months ago, arms slung around each other, smiling like we had the whole world ahead of us. Underneath it, she had written, "You're getting her back. I'm so damn proud of you." I sat there for a long time, staring at that photo, feeling tears prick at my eyes. Not from sadness this time, from hope. Maybe the road back to myself wasn't going to be easy. Maybe there would still be bad days, still be scars that pulled tight when I least expected it. But I wasn't lost anymore, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready for whatever came next. It rained the morning. Everything came full circle. Not the soft, gentle kind of rain that whispered against windows. This was heavy, pounding, relentless. I watched it from the tiny balcony outside my apartment, coffee warming my hands, and it felt almost poetic. Like the sky was washing everything clean. Like even the universe knew it was time to let go of the last of it. The final trace of Ralph came in the form of an envelope. No name, no return address. Just slid under my door like some cheap horror movie stunt. For a second, I stood frozen, staring at it like it might explode. Then I picked it up. Inside was a letter, messy, angry handwriting I recognized immediately. Ralph. It wasn't an apology. Of course not. It was a sad, rambling mess about how I'd ruined him, how he was nothing without me, how he hoped I was happy being the villain. I read it once, then dropped it into the trash without another thought, because he was right about one thing. I was happy being the villain in his story. If it meant saving myself, if it meant choosing my own damn life over being someone's punching bag, then fine. Let him tell whatever version he needed to tell to sleep at night. I wasn't that broken girl anymore. I wasn't standing at the edge of my life begging for scraps of kindness. I was already halfway across the bridge to something better when David showed up later, soaked from the rain and carrying a bag of groceries like some kind of wet puppy. I laughed so hard I actually had to wipe tears from my face. You're insane, I said, grabbing the bag from him before he dropped it. He grinned, pushing wet hair out of his eyes. Couldn't let you starve, could I? We cooked together badly, burned the toast, undercooked the eggs, spilled coffee grounds all over the counter. It should have been frustrating, but instead it was one of the happiest mornings I could remember. One point, while we were sitting at the tiny kitchen table, plates abandoned, David reached across and took my hand in his. No words, no big speeches, just warm fingers curling around mine, grounding me. I squeezed his hand back, that simple, silent promise, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere, said more than anything Ralph ever managed with all his empty words. Later that night, as I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror again. Same face, same tired eyes, but there was something different. Now, something stronger. I had survived, not because someone had saved me, not because someone had fought my battles, because I had fought for myself, because when everything shattered, I didn't just gather the pieces. I learned how to build something entirely new. And the beautiful thing about starting over from scratch, you get to decide what's worth keeping. I turned off the light and crawled under the covers, feeling the rain still tapping softly against the windows. David's soft breathing filled the room. He had fallen asleep in the chair by the window, like he wasn't quite ready to leave yet. I smiled, pulling the blanket tighter around me. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't cheap. I was free, and tomorrow, whatever tomorrow looked like, was finally, beautifully mine.